absolutely honoured tonight to have the most amazing panel that you could possibly imagine talking tonight. I only asked 4 people to do this, and I was deeply honoured when all 4 said yes, which was absolutely fantastic. And number 4 is on his way right now. So that is really what I call making an entrance. Very good.
One of us is delayed just like Brexit.
Just like Brexit.
So Ranjan's on the northern step tonight, we'll start at this end with John. John Corey has more than 37 years' experience, ranging from the software industry in Silicon Valley, at one point reporting directly to Steve Jobs, I'm told. He also now raises capital for property ventures. He has a comprehensive knowledge of multinational real estate markets and owns a property portfolio spanning 11 time zones. Is that right?
Hawaii to Bradford.
From Hawaii to Bradford. That's quite an achievement.
And a Brit has never asked about why Hawaii. They always say, why Bradford?
And seated next to him, Andrew Roberts has been investing in property since 2005. And he's a true entrepreneur with a passion for putting together deals. With a solid background in tax and accounting, he runs a number of property and non-property businesses, and he's also worked at a senior level in banking and at a top 20 law firm. Now, Ranjan Bhattacharya is one of the UK's leading property experts who has built an extensive portfolio of residential and commercial property in London over the last 28 years. He regularly comments in the press and media on the property investment market, is an advisor to Channel 4's Property Ladder, and author of the best-selling Build Your Property Empire home study course. And at the end, my neighbour from Cambridgeshire, Fiona Talbot, who's been a multi-millionaire property investor for nearly 20 years, with a wide range of investments in both the UK and in America, from buy-to-lets, commercial buildings, and even a hotel and a sports bar. She's got an eagle eye for financial details, and her day-to-day priority is on scaling her companies. A proud mother to 2 busy teenagers, she even finds the time to be a mentor and a speaker, and we're very happy to have everybody with us tonight. Yay! One of the things that happened in 2016, there was some kind of referendum about something I don't try to forget, and as a result, sterling kind of adjusted, so now we see a situation where for dollar-denominated buyers, London property is about 40% cheaper than it was in 2014. So there are bargains to be picked up for those who don't live in the UK. So one of the questions I think to ask ourselves is, why has there not been a stampede to buy all this value property that is in London? Certainly we haven't seen the kind of volumes that we might expect from a situation like this. So there is some degree of uncertainty that has stopped even contrarian investors such as myself from taking the plunge. I was at the front of the queue in 2008, 2009, buying below market, getting 20-30% off my deals, because I'm a property cycles kind of a guy. And I like to invest in a contrarian fashion, so I like to, I know John isn't a great fan of the sort of property cycle concept, but
we'll get to that.
In a sense, let's call it value investing then. So when the numbers stack, which tends to happen more often on the cyclical nature, in my view, then I'm out there with my checkbook. And so I was getting discounts of the kind that hadn't been seen for an awfully long time, just after the credit crash. Let's agree to call it that. But I haven't been reaching for the checkbook again because, in a sense, I think
checkbooks anymore.
I'm a guy who doesn't do online banking, and so I'm from that sort of from a different generation. But there are reasons which we might go into later as to why I've held back on this occasion, because when you've got a financial meltdown, you kind of know where you are and you know how it's going to pan out. There's a wonderful book actually by a guy called John Kenneth Galbraith called The Crash of 29, which explains how every financial crisis has different causes but they tend to sort of play out in the same way as politicians smooth the waters. They have to kind of calm everybody down to make sure that there are not too many knee-jerk reactions and repercussions. They do this in similar ways. They've all been to public school, which interestingly in England are private schools, and so they've all learned history and they all know how to sort of do this. So these things tend to sort of repeat. By coincidence, I was reading J.K. Galbraith's book. He's a fabulous author, was a wonderful economist. And so in order to work out what was going to happen in 2009, 10, 11, I just looked at what happened in 1930, 31 and 32 in his book, where he sort of described in great detail how it was going to pan out. And that really helped me on my sort of investment journey. At the moment, there are more... Oh yes, you missed the little announcement at the beginning there, Ranjan. About telephones. There are more factors at play now than I've seen in the whole 38 years that I've been investing. So I'm holding off a bit, not so much because of the outcome of Brexit, because of possible changes in Westminster, which might lead to an administration, shall we say, that is far less friendly to property investors than we've seen for a couple of generations. So I think, and I think that's perhaps something that has caused overseas investors to hold back on London rather than the whole Brexit thing. That's just my personal opinion, and we'll discuss that again later. But I've taken my foot off the gas for a bit. But next year I expect to be going full pelt. So that's just me. There's also a situation which we find in the prime residential, and here we are in the middle of prime, probably super prime part of London, in that you don't tend to get many distressed vendors in these kind of markets. So when markets do take a bit of a tumble, when properties take a bit longer to sell, when there are market corrections in places like this, in places like Cambridge where I invest, in the other place, Oxford and so forth, people just pull their properties off the market. So the market sort of contracts and they wait for things to correct. Nonetheless, there were superb bargains happening after the credit crunch because everybody was in a real tears then, and it was possible to capitalise on that. But we find now that the only people who would actually put stuff on at the moment are people who are experiencing the traditional things of bereavement, divorce, inheritance, these kinds of crisis opportunities that happen for some property investors. Another question is this, I'm just posing these as questions now, which my fellow panellists will answer probably at 8:15. UBS recently looked at 15 major cities all around the world, and they ranked London number 1 on what they called a bubble index with a score close to 1.9, which is really, really high. They observed that between 1985 and 2009, whenever this particular index exceeded the score of 1, and we're way above that now, there was a real price correction of, on average, 30%, which would begin within 3 years, and that's with a 95% certainty level. We've got the situation now where your average Londoner is earning, maybe £35,000 a year. It's maybe taken them 6 months or something to save up that deposit. At the end of it, they're going to find themselves able to buy, say, a third of a property. So there are real affordability issues here in the marketplace, which over the length of time that I've been investing, we haven't really seen it get quite this bad. So what happens when something like that occurs, when there is a situation like that? Normally, overseas investors pick up the slack, but if they're not, then we might be heading for some kind of major price correction. That is a possibility at this point in time. We might, these are all possibilities, we might be in line for a base rate cut. And what would that mean to us as investors? It would certainly mean that it was less expensive to buy these super expensive properties. But again, would there be an appetite, and how long would that take to feed through to the general market as such? And then there is this Brexit thing. One thing that hasn't really been discussed about Britain's possible exit or not from the European Union at some unspecified future date is the right to rent checks. How will this obligation upon property investors to check the legal rights of their tenants to be in the properties, how will that affect citizens of the European Union at a point where the migration rules will be changing? So this could massively reduce the potential tenant pool, which again might have an impact on investors in terms of lengthy voids and this kind of thing. The wild card, climate change, which is a favourite of my friend Fiona here, is something that many scientists believe, probably the majority of scientists believe, is on the way. And we've denied this for many, many years. Things are sort of changing. We are seeing some extreme kind of climate events now. We are seeing ice caps melting and this kind of thing. And you can go online and you can find maps of the UK whereby you can map what would happen if the sea level rose and how many bits of it would be an island. I'm based, my investments are in East Anglia, where probably about a quarter of it disappears underwater. And for example, my friend Fiona's a town here of Ely becomes an island surrounded by water. So all those buy-to-lets, they have to swim to work in the morning and this kind of thing. So that potentially might be an issue moving forward. There might be sort of migrational effects that happen as a result of that. And I think, you know, for those of us who've got young children now, if they're in their 20s, I think during their lifetime we are likely to see seismic, unprecedented changes in the way that people live their lives. There'll be more sort of eco-homes for sure, but we might see a changing coastline depending on future governments' willingness to invest in protecting coastlines. Clearly, they'll need to sort of replace the Thames barrier here in London and this kind of thing, which if we didn't have it now, we'd all be underwater here. So it will be a constant battle as climate change starts to take effect, because this accelerates. And once things happen like the permafrost starts to melt, releasing all the methane and so forth, then the whole thing accelerates. So it is something that we as investors need to focus on. We've seen corporate landlords taking over the sector. This has been, as I travel around the country doing talks, I pull into railway stations and I look out the window and I see lots of new buildings, very often close to railway stations on land that had previously been idle. It's certainly the case in my local Cambridge, where we have a £1 billion investment that's nearly complete. Corporates have suddenly decided that an 8% yield or whatever is okay, it's worth going all in on. They're doing deals with educational establishments whereby suddenly all those student HMOs are empty, and obviously that has a knock-on effect on the residential buy-to-let market. I was coming on the train to London today, just crossing Holloway Road in London. There are masses of student accommodation, in almost like a whole city there, built trackside, which impacts the kind of smaller landlords who have already been affected by tax changes and changes in legislation like that. So that is another thing that we have to look at. I mean, where is, for example, where's the corner shop? They're not around anymore, and they've been taken over by all the Tesco's and Sainsbury's and Asda's and other brands are available. So that's a thing. Modular housing is another factor, something else that's on the way. Prefabs are more popular, perhaps in Scandinavia than in other countries, but increasingly it's great to have everything arrive on the back of a lorry and all be erected in a week. Shops like Tesco when they build the small ones, they call Tesco Express, I believe, when they put their small shops in, they're increasingly constructed in a factory somewhere else, and they're brought in and slid in a day. That they just sort of measure up the unit and they're good to go. But we're likely to see similar revolutions like that in housing, in the way that our things are built. We might even be 3D printing houses. So I think we're going to see real changes in the way that accommodation is physically put together. And as I mentioned earlier, I think we're going to see far more eco-friendly homes. I think it's going to be a matter of necessity. So, for example, gas will be out, won't it, within a couple of decades, and this kind of thing. And so big changes as far as that is concerned.
And tech in houses as well.
And
tech.
Oh yes.
Smart houses.
Yeah, tech and smart houses are going to make a very big difference to the way we lead our lives too, and that is, this is the decade where all this stuff is going to be happening. We've just sort of read about it in kind of science fiction books up until this time, but the technology is there and the will is there to implement all these kinds of things. We're all driving around in our electric cars now, those who don't have push bikes like me, and so these kinds of things are going to happen. Will house prices across the UK continue to rise? I mean, when you make investments, they always say past performance is no guarantee of future performance, and so will this finally be the decade that stalls things for a bit? I remember the 1990s when we had George Soros, the international investor, betting against the pound, combined with the then Chancellor, who was Nigel Lawson, Nigella's dad. He introduced a restriction on mortgage interest relief that people could claim, but he announced this about 9 months before it came into play. And the result, fundamentally, of those two things were called MIRES. The result of those two things was that property in London took a real kicking, so that throughout most of the following decade, most of the 1990s, the market was flat. From about 1990 till about 1998, all my investment decisions could have been done on the back of a cigarette packet if I was a smoker, but in my case, at the back of a postcard. And so I had metrics. I didn't need to use my customary spreadsheets, and I was able to do viewings, shake hands and buy things very, very rapidly without watching too many numbers, because I knew the numbers that worked for me in my business, and they were constant. And it was quite a shock then when the things started to change and the dynamic altered again. I had to sort of adjust to that. And remember, again in Japan, they had a long period of stagflation. So just because we're an island, and just because there's a limited amount of land and building space, doesn't mean that things might stall in that kind of way. And it's important to remember, as I think it was John saying on Sunday when we met up, that the UK hasn't always been a nation of property owners as we believe it has been today. That this is a relatively recent phenomenon, but I'll leave you to talk more about that in due course. And then prop tech has been a major influence on us. We see kind of Airbnb now, all that kind of thing, but people now are talking about the equivalent of Airbnb on steroids, whereby the expectations of future renters, because of opportunities opened up by online, may skyrocket now, so that people expect every few months to be moving, and employment, and we all sort of work from home now, and employment things change and people move around. People may come to expect now being able to move from one fully furnished, fully equipped thing to another similar kind of unit somewhere else very quickly and with very little friction. And that is something as well that our modern technologies may enable.
I don't consider myself a political pundit or, someone like Rob that puts a lot of his opinions on politics, economics, all that kind of stuff online. So, what am I doing here? I'm a director of a property company. We have a very large balance sheet. I've been going for 21 years, actually, and my parents were landlords. So I've been in this business for quite a while, right from when I was young. What am I doing with my property company over this next period? So I think that's possibly maybe beneficial for me to talk about. So, and just so many things whirling around in my head, the cost of debt at the moment. So I refinanced £5 million worth of debt, part of my debt, in September, and I got 3.19% with Foundation Home Loans. Actually, I rinsed them out, but my part actually ended, I filled up the cup, so to speak. And I thought that was an amazing rate. 5 years fixed at 3.19. I thought that was good. I'm also getting, I also got a residential mortgage too in this last month with Coventry Home Loans. 2.6% fixed for 10 years, might have been 2.68. For 10 years fixed, 85% loan to value. These are some very, very good low rates. Obviously, when we're looking at the cost of debt, that gives us traction in the market too. Because I'm going out there going, do I wait? Is there going to be a gapping down? I call rather than a correction. What's happening? But I'm now looking at deals on a case-by-case basis. If I can buy a deal and it'll yield for 6 or 7% strong single-let yield for my area, it's not London, it's not up north. I get both capital growth and some yields. But I'm paying the right price for that asset, and my cost of debt is good, and I'm getting cash flow. You know what? If it's 5% cheaper next year, I'll have got that net profit for that period as well. So I'm sort of mixing it all in. I've got 4 deals going through at the moment. 4. One just completed, it was a selling landlord. It was a city centre flat, I got it for a cracking price off a selling landlord. Doing a small refurbishment, it's going to yield 6.7%, which is amazing in my area for a single land. Really easy to maintain, but that was a selling landlord. I'm buying another flat, which is a divorcing couple. It was on for 160. I got it for 140. The other thing to say is these two properties are very, very rare. They don't come on the market. They're right behind one of the main streets in my city, and I'm seeing sort of you talk about less stock maybe being put on the market. I'm seeing landlords offloading stock that I've not seen in quality time before for a while. I'm doing a city centre house as well. Absolutely amazing. It's B&V by about probably 20 to 25%. That was direct from a developer who, a property investment company, different one in my area, messaged me on LinkedIn while I was in my Bay Area retreat recently and said, I need to shift this. It's a 3-bed, said the price, I knew straight away it was a bargain. I arranged to see him on the Monday, agreed the deal straight away, we're in process at the moment. And it's because he's building 5 houses and his builder's gone bankrupt. So he needs some cash quickly. So I'm closing on it for cash and then I'll sort it out in a bit. And I've just agreed on Tuesday a pub. So that deal I talked about, I've closed it, I've agreed it. Fantastic. Below bricks and mortar value, Karen knows as well, I told her about it on Friday at Partners in Property. Below bricks and mortar value, absolutely, they've not claimed capital allowances available to claim, 15-year, commercial lease. I'm not waiting, I'm doing these deals. Each of these deals are an absolutely fabulous deal. They all work, they all cash flow, where I'm getting finance, the debt is affordable, management of them are good, they fit my model, got opportunity to optimise on 3 of the 4 deals. So I'm still moving forward because otherwise I think I could just get paralysed into inaction if I sat too long and just waited for, is Corbyn going to get in? Well, you know what? Mayhem and challenge is actually good for business for me. I'm a property company, so it's fine. I've got my team, I've got the way I operate, all my blueprint, everything like that. I understand what it is that I'm doing, where I'm going, how I finance my stuff, how I manage my stuff. So I've got my house in order, so to speak. And I think that, what am I trying to say here? I think as property investors, or business people in general, should always be forward looking at the challenges and thinking, what could go wrong? How can I pivot? If Corbyn gets in, right, what's my pivot? What do I need to be aware of? If if we leave the EU, right, what's my pivot? What am I aware of? What am I worrying about here? And always keep a layer of sort of protection around you. In my property company, what does that look like? It looks like me being tapped into the market, understanding what's going on, talking to my peers. I'm lucky enough to have a great peer group in the property world. There's a lot of good people out there, like people here today. And some of my friends are in the audience here as well. We keep communicate with each other, keeping cash. I keep unencumbered assets I can access if I need to. I can put charges on to do deals. I make sure that my finance is affordable rates. I personally prefer fixed rates. Don't always go for 5 years. I look at it on a case-by-case basis. Keep my stock well managed. Don't have my debt at high leverage amounts, and I just try and look at this whole next period in 3D and try and think how, I think of it like a tanker out at sea. Is there going to be one of them random waves coming at me? Is there going to be a hole blown in the bottom of my boat? Are my crew all on board? Do they understand where we're going? Are they all healthy? Am I healthy? All that sort of stuff. So in terms of things like climate change, I'm Australian, so we're always very interested in the environment. I would probably invest in land in North America, because if you read the reports, that's one of the areas that's going to be the least affected by climate change, so it's probably going to see a lot of immigration over these next 10, 20 years. And if you go on the website like I do, and look at land, these random sites, 500 acres for 200k, I was thinking, we might do that actually. So I'm not too hung up on things like how that's going to affect my portfolio at the moment. But again, every month I've got a board advisor I work with, and we do have a part of what we work through together each month is what's the challenges and risks to our business, And that gives me a chance to think, what are my challenges and risks? You know, if Corbyn gets elected, how's that going to influence? It may create some unsettlement. Actually, again, back to that's good for business because I'm a value investor. Am I getting a good rent? Am I paying a good debt price on that asset? Have I got opportunity to optimise? You know, can I get capital allowance claims like in this pub that I'm buying? You know, it's magic. It's dreams of property investor dreams are made of when you say, you know, you claim capital allowances and they don't even know what capital allowances are. So yeah, I think by taking that's 6 minutes. So you're free to ask me questions in the break or in the panel.
I've been doing this since 1990, so I'll just say what's different really. I've lived through a couple of periods of uncertainty in my property investment career. What triggers those sort of, the market always goes in cycles, ups and downs. What causes markets to go down is different in each cycle. But what happens when the market changes direction is reasonably similar each time. I'm going to share with you 3 studies and statistics, if you like. One of them is from Savills, who put out a bit of research earlier this month, saying that the housing market in the UK today has never been so uncertain since 2009. Very interesting date they correlated to. There was another piece of research from Savills they put out around about Easter time this year, which said that the best time to have bought property in the last 30 years was in high value areas between 2009 and 2014. Very, very interesting time. Because when the market tips a little bit, the herds who listen to all the mass media and all of that kind of go with what the mass media is saying. But the savvy investors know that averages are averages, and they know how to look behind the headlines and identify value and buy value and add value in those times. Because the thing with the property market is, if you buy at the peak, you have to wait a very, very long time before your property exceeds that value. But if you buy in a dip, it doesn't matter whether or not you time the bottom of the dip. As long as you buy and accumulate value assets that you can add value to, at any point at which the direction of travel starts to look uncertain, then that is the time to fill your boots. Because logically, if you're buying into a downward cycle, you don't have to wait too long in terms of years before you start to add significant value, particularly if you buy under market and if you add value to it. Many of you know, has anyone seen my stuff on YouTube? Yeah? I put out a video on YouTube 5 days ago. It's had 7,000 views actually. It's been one of the most popular in terms of views in the shortest amount of time, which is Brexit uncertainty, who the winners and losers will be. So if you go online and watch that, you just search my name on YouTube, you'll find that video. It's Brexit uncertainty, who the winners and losers will be. That will give you my spiel on what I think about that. I said I was going to say 3 statistics and studies. The third piece of research is a bit of research that I put out for me, which is that 99% of all research and studies is below me. And the reason I say that is because most people follow this and they don't look behind it to find the opportunity. I'll give you a prime example of that, for example, I mean, David highlighted a study, was it USB? Yeah, the UBS, sorry, that's the memory stick, isn't it? I'm dyslexic, what can I say? I get things confused. UBS put out a study about London market, you know, and if you look at the averages, that's right. But I know that's not the case. I mean, I'm looking at I think this is the right time to pick up something, not really for investment, it's just something that I want to do for our own personal usage, which is to pick up a nice flat in a Zone 1 area. So we're looking very, very specifically. Zone 1, share freehold, because the service charges are much, much lower, and with parking. Now that is quite a unicorn spec for a Zone 1 property. Now, if you look at the properties which ain't selling, that you can't give away, that are experiencing 20-30% discounts, which are occupying all the headlines, then those are the new build towers that you're getting in the city area and off the Thames, where the service charges are God knows how much. They're about there. You can, for the annual service charge, you can buy a house up north, for God's sake. The ground rents are nearly as much as a car, and they want an overinflated price for the thing in the first place. So of course you're going to see 20-30% falls from that. But in my search for the Zone 1 share freehold flat with low service charge and parking, I have found that when I'm putting my offers in, even if I'm sort of 10% below the asking price, they're gone in a week to someone else. So the point I'm trying to make is that the savvy investor during this time will kind of slightly ignore the headlines and all the stuff that's put out there, because I'm not saying that's not true, but that will affect property types and classes, which as an investor you shouldn't be interested in anyway. Who in their right mind wants to buy some off-plan glass tower flat which you'd never make any money on in the first place? You're going to be looking to identify value and buy it at a good price from preferably motivated sellers, but property with plenty of meat on the bone so that you can add value to it. One of the best ways of adding value to property that I see in the market ahead is exploiting permitted development rights. Permitted development rights allow you to add significant value to property with no planning uncertainty at all. Planning permission, I've got a site in planning at the moment in Islington. It's actually for an eco-friendly. I'm very Trumparian on climate, actually. So I've hired this architect planning consultant who's the complete opposite of me, and is green and is into all this eco, and she's put forward this proposal for this lovely zero carbon, whatever it is, house with a green roof and all of that. And we're going to get it in Islington. It'll be a little house and a project. And I think the green angle is a great way to get little developments, particularly infill sites, through lefty planning departments, because you put a green roof on and they seem to love it. That's another topic. But that has taken more than a year to start to reach to fruition. Just the pre-app alone took about 6 months. Whereas permitted development rights are a completely different ballgame. Permitted development rights are rights that the central government are giving you to develop properties. And you don't have to ask anyone. You put in a notice, 56 days, you get it. There's nothing they can say. They hate it. The councils hate it. But the central government have given these rights to developers. And they've given the most permitted development rights for repurposing buildings are available for commercial properties. Because commercial property, and this is going to be the real story for the next decade, is going through a sea change. Because most commercial properties, whether they're offices, retail, I've got videos on this on my YouTube channel, industrial units are defunct for their original purpose. And as business changes, when the motor car came, I wasn't alive then, but when the motor car came in, all these stables in London and all of this, there were more than 10,000 horses parked in Camden. All these commercial buildings became defunct as the whole way of business became changed as a result of the motor car. Also with railways, when you didn't need to have cows producing milk in the centre of towns, and you could just bring milk in, the whole need for agricultural farms into urban centres just diminished. So we always see this. We see this period where the internet is changing the way all commercial properties are being used. Many of them are becoming defunct. We do a lot of office rentals, and we find that when we come up to because so many people have converted office buildings into residential, yeah? So office rents have gone up in many good areas. So when we do rent reviews with office tenants, because we do a lot of commercial property as well as residential property, we find that the rents have gone up significantly from the last rent review. And what happens is, some of our tenants say, well, we'll just completely refit our office and take half the space. The reason they can manage to do the same with half the space is because no one has filing cabinets anymore. No one needs these desks which were built for those big, deep monitors. You can now do a lot more with the same, with much less square footage in an office space. So there's plenty of office buildings that are now redundant. We're doing one of our big projects at the moment is a serviced office building and business centre, co-working centre in the heart of St Albans. There are going to be about 45 businesses there. It'll be fully ready, operational in mid-January. But we're finding, we've done one floor as a test and it's fully let, but it's amazing the sort of businesses that come in there, because no one's, people's presence is all online. The physical location of where they're located is irrelevant. Because everyone comes in with their VoIP phones, they reroute back to wherever they are, they've got their website and email, where they are physically located doesn't matter. And the other thing I found really amazing, we get these people come along and they say they want a 3-person suite. And you look up their website to see what they are, and you go to the About Us, About Our People page, and you see 50 people on there. You know, it's not 50 people occupying a 3-person suite. It's all virtual teams and collaborative workings, and it's just a different way of doing business now. So as a result of that, many commercial buildings need to be repurposed. Many of them are unfit. So the government have given us a whole bunch of rights to redevelop those buildings to other uses. And that's where the opportunity is, because at this time, most investors, not in this room of course, but most people who watch TV, you know, Homes Under the Hammer and all that sort of stuff, they're momentum investors. They jump on the bandwagon, they buy something and hope it naturally goes up in value. That's a load of baloney, isn't it? I mean, in a time like this, if you expect the market to go down a little bit, as it will do, there's no point buying stuff at market value. It's a complete waste of time. What you've got to buy is stuff that's under market value from where it's sellers and add significant value to it in a quick space of time. And the best way of doing that is through permitted development on repurposing commercial properties. Because if the market's going to fall 5-6% and you can buy well and add 30-40% of value, then you're quits in no matter what the market has done. Now, how do I know this? Well, I did this, same sort of strategy, but not with PD, in the 2009 to 2014 period and in the early 1990s period. And I've done it a couple of times in previous cycles, and now I'm ready to have some fun in the next one, because I think I know what I'm doing, because I've been there a couple of times.
3 awesome talks. I'm sitting here and going, what do they talk about? Well, I'll come at this from a different perspective, if I may. As an accountant, having worked at a senior level in a bank and got headhunted to a law firm, so I've seen it from a property side, because I grew up in the property trade, that was my father's industry. From a financial side in a bank, from a numbers side as an accountant, and from a legal side. Now, newspapers and the press work on headlines. Who loves the headline, property boom or property bust? Mm-hmm. It sells newspapers, the media love it. Do we love it as investors? We ignore it, generally speaking. But I do follow certain pieces of data that's published. Professional organisations where I have seen firsthand why data is published. And I follow RICS, Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, because they are a barometer on the market. The reason they're a barometer on the market, and in December they'll be publishing what I call the State of the Union Address, their forecast for the next 12 months and 3 to 5 year window. And that is important because that sets the tone for the valuers who come in and value buildings for those people who want to borrow money. So if you're not following that trend, that is an important trend to follow. Last year, they said prices will be flat or negative. Fiona's telling us she's buying stock cheap. Ranjan is saying he's buying stock cheap because we're on a downward cycle. RICS got it right 12 months ago. Why did they get it right? Surveyors have professional indemnity insurance. If the surveyor turns up just 20 grand more than the last person bought it for 3 months ago, the bank is going to smack them in a few years' time if that property gets into any trouble. I was there working for the solicitors, actually seeing how they identify cases of mis-selling or misvaluing. Therefore, that is a good barometer to watch, the RICS survey, because surveyors will jump up and down about their professional insurance premiums if they go up, because it puts them out of business. So that's a technical piece of data to follow. and an indicator, and I believe the next report will be saying very similar to what the last one did. Prices will be negative or down. I talk to a lot of agents across the UK because I have stock across the UK. They are all saying stock is between 5 and 30% down. It's following a trend. They're seeing valuers rejecting or deals falling over because values have downvalued and mortgage offers not being honoured. Therefore, it's an opportunity for us as investors, if we've built ourselves a cash pile or managed our assets so we've got an unencumbered one, to buy additional stock at this time, because the cycle is down, and as Ranjan quite correctly says, do you want to buy at the top of the cycle to wait to go down the cycle and come back up, or do you want to buy halfway down or towards the bottom because you've got less distance to travel before you get into profit? Going back to data and looking at trend lines, from the data I monitor, from many sources, the trend line is actually above pricing. Now this comes back to affordability. And if we look at affordability of property, and I've got youngsters, sort of Nina's age at the back there, who are aspiring to get on the property market, banks are now lending 5 times earnings to help you get onto the market. Do you think banks will lend you 10 times earnings and increase the term to 50 years if prices keep going up? Or do we actually need a market correction? So I believe we're in a position of market correction to balance that affordability, because we as investors are one section of the market and we account for around about 20% of the stock. You've got the social housing, which is another 20%, and the retail marketplace 60%. If 60% of the market can't afford, that disrupts the market, that disrupts prices. Therefore, we need to monitor data to see where we're at. Now, I monitor stuff on an economic macro and micro level, and Rod and I were talking a little bit earlier about this. My personal view is, as a UK, we're an island, and we like to think we're in control of our destiny.
Go Brexit.
Well, I agree, John. But are we? Because I'm looking at data, and I have multiple businesses, in property and out of property, as David said. And Germany is one of my business partners for my non-property business. Germany is in recession. Is that going to ripple over here? Of course it is. America is stuttering. China is stuttering. Globally, the markets are stalling. We look at our own economic data, and the most recent data was they were predicting a slight fall in numbers, but actually we've come out slightly above, which means we're not in recession in this country. However, we are teetering on the edge as a small island, and I would liken it to, there's a hurricane passing by and we're just caught in the wind as it passes by. We're affected by America's interest rates. America dropped its interest rates. Britain has said, we're going to hold steady. If we hold steady, that's good in one way but bad in another, because money moves across international borders. We as small people might not do this, but institutions move that money. And if money is flowing across borders, is it coming into the UK or out of the UK, David? How is it coming into the UK, and what's it being invested in? Is it for interest rate arbitrage, or is it into real estate? So we need to look at this data. And I would also look at the data about stock. Now, a really great indicator of stock and how well it's shifting at any particular point in a cycle is, are Kingfisher, Homebase and others doing well? At the moment, they're reporting sales up, and it was by a ridiculous amount of billions of pounds spent on home improvements, because people are choosing to stay where they are rather than sell. That's another prime indicator that stock is not coming onto the market. Therefore, stock that does come onto the market has more of a pain or a problem. Therefore, we can achieve greater discounts at this point in time, because you're only going to bring the property onto the market if finance is drying up because of worldwide finance, and interest rates are not going to move terribly out of line with global interest rates, as much as we might think they would. They won't. Therefore, it's going to give us opportunities as investors. Now, looking further down the line, where does this take us? Well, Brexit, Brexit not, Brexit what? We don't know at this point in time. But what we can do is forecast. Are we going to go back and live in caves? Are we going to move our businesses onto market stalls again? Not really. Are people still going to go to work, have jobs, want goods and chattels because we find them appeasing to us? What we need to do is look at what is changing. Cycles are getting shorter. Technology is changing processes. I remember a long time ago, people said, when I was much younger and in my schooling years, that computers were going to make us all redundant. They now create more jobs for people than ever before. Industries have grown up and mushroomed. Who would have thought 10 years ago people could have a job as a social media marketeer or engineer, as they call them? There wasn't even an industry there. What we have to do is look for trends and spot opportunities and move there. But I won't go into John's territory of tech, because that's your field of expertise. But I believe we need to look at where markets are moving and forecast and predict. And that's one of the things I like to do, monitoring data and forecast and predict.
So this has gotten way more complicated than I expected. So I'm going to make some notes of something. Because David's saying I'm going to say this, and someone else has said, like, okay, what am I supposed to say? No. This is sort of easier, because then I can say, we'll wrap it up to go to the break, right? So when was the peak of the UK's power in the world? Strongest currency, strongest military, top of the world. Exactly, 1908. It's been all shit since then. Now, almost. Would you have wanted some property at 1908 prices in London now?
Yes.
Right? So it's been all declining since then, and you'd still want to own the assets. Okay? Why do people have houses? It's to live in, right? What is the population doing? It's going up. So do we need more houses or less?
Or less people.
Well, the Nazis tried that. It didn't work so well. So we just announced today that we're going to remove the immigration barriers. That was just published today by the Conservatives. We're not going to have a cap on immigration, because that is what was important in the Brexit vote, but it's like number 7 on the list right now, and the voters can't think that deep. So we're back to, like, economy or whatever. Immigration is no longer the issue. In fact, it's particularly a problem because we get older. I'm probably the oldest in the panel. And the NHS can't get any workers. So you can either go somewhere else for your medical treatment or bring the workers in. We just won't get the cheap ones from Europe. We'll get the expensive ones. Notice we have Australia to America on the panel. So when was this country a nation of renters? David said I had to answer this.
Turn of the last 30s?
Turn of the last century, 30s.
Or when the land reg came in.
Land reg. Well, I don't know if anyone knows that.
Oh yeah, because
32.
when you had landowners and lords owning the.
Yeah, okay, you're wrong, but. So when the Queen took the throne, the majority of the country rented. We still have the same Queen. So it's only in her period of reign. She's been around a long time. So 53, we're a nation of renters. I think it was 70%. This homeowner crap is a new thing. It's a baby boomer invention. But most of us, the baby boomers, are younger, so that's all we remember. So we think we're a nation of homeowners. It's how you tell the story. It's sort of like how he was saying, if you got to look at the data, and then actually Ranjan talked about it. You're going to ask, like, yeah, but what is the backstory to the data? So I could tell you text stories about how things really happened, and then there's the summarized version in the latest book or something. How many people lived through World War II? Probably next to no one. How can they get a whole 7-year battle into, war into one book? They leave a lot of the data out, and they just sort of skim over the stuff, right? So you have to be careful about what you believe, and if you ask the wrong question, you'll end up with the wrong answer. Look at the Brexit vote. What was the question? Do you want your independence? No one's ever going to vote to be a slave. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, there's a state in the US, the license plates say, live free or die. They'd rather be dead, right? It's not how they vote. So change, as Fiona talked about, is actually one of the keys. And so, in fact, the whole panel talked about it. Now, who in here has bought the UK property market? You traded the UK property market, bought or sold. So you have? How did you do?
By buying a property.
No. You didn't buy the market. You bought a damn house.
Part of the market.
You bought statistically nothing.
Yeah.
So who has actually bought an index or a contract or something that gave you exposure to the whole market? Yeah, Crazy would be one of the only ones ever. Okay. So fundamentally, none of us buy or sell the market. We buy or sell buildings. How do we get good deals?
What does that even mean? I'm too,
Well, everybody
too
talks-
much of a beginner to
No,
even know what you're talking
this
about.
is good.
That
Everybody
sentence.
talks about the market
Right,
as if you can trade the market.
right,
There's no index.
okay.
You buy a house. Where do you get a bargain? You look for someone getting divorced. You look for someone that has a dependency on drugs or alcohol. You look for someone who's got a debt problem. You look for someone who's got to relocate because they had a death in the family or something like that. Those buyers and sellers become much more motivated than what the market's doing. You have a builder who has a bankruptcy, and not the builder, but the builder's team company was bankrupt. They have to now get liquid so they can finish the project. It wasn't their fault, but that's why the bargain popped up. You don't buy any market. All these statistics are great, except it's not what you do. There was an article in the FT every January, the first week. This happened for about 5 years, and I've been here for 25 years. I don't quite remember when this was. And it would say, stock market, property, which one did better last year? And they would use the FTSE 100, and they would use the property index. And it tends to be neck and neck, and stock market won this year by 1%, property won last year by 2%, whatever. And then one year they published an article saying, sorry, we've had it wrong all these years. So we're comparing a complete cash purchase stock market index with a house where no one buys houses with just cash, or most people don't. So if we recalculate this based on how people buy houses with a bit of debt, every year housing's won the contest. We've just been misreporting it for 5 years. This was like on the front page of the FT in the Saturday section, the first week of January every year, and then they had to say, sorry, we got it wrong. But for 5 years, if you believed what they said, it's false. So don't buy the markets. This whole cycle thing, you're buying deals. If you get a deal at 20% off and the cycle's going down or up, like who the hell cares? Especially when you have positive cash flow and you've locked in a 10-year contract on the interest rate. It's like, what is your exposure? If the market crashes around you, you buy some more, right? So you have,
Hallelujah. I give you hallelujah.
say amen, yeah. We'll do the whole American thing. So Philadelphia has some real bargains right now. People are buying like houses, 2 and 3 unit houses for $70,000. How many here in London is going over there? Right? None of you. And then very few Americans are buying in London because like, that's Britain, isn't that like over the water? Even though it's 40% off. Brexit was the greatest deal for foreigners. Only the people with sterling got screwed. Everybody else gets a bargain, 20% off on day one, and it's only gotten better. So country of renters, which country in Europe needed an IMF bailout? First European country. We have Greece, Ireland, Greece. First country in Europe. Okay, now we figured it out. First country in Europe that needed IMF bailout was the one you're in. Go Britain.
Under
1976 went bankrupt.
Perfect.
Okay? Now this is back when you couldn't keep the lights on more than 3 days a week.
Yes.
So I don't have a UK passport, I can't vote. Maybe there was context. Maybe actually, as he said, you have to understand the context of what was going on.
3 months been strikes.
Strikes, union
3 months.
issues. Yeah. But so the UK needed an IMF bailout because it was bankrupt. And Thatcher was after that. Some of the selling off the housing stock. Why'd you sell off the housing stock? What's the popular answer? To buy votes, right? The other reason might be because we couldn't afford to maintain the shit. If we sell it to the people living in it, they'll have to pay for it. So shift the asset off the balance sheet, let those people maintain it, because we have no money left, because we just came out of bankruptcy. What was going on with interest rates in '76?
They were about to go up to 16.
17%.
Well, they weren't quite that high then, but yes, it was quite.
17%.
There's like whole decades when they're over 10%. Fiona's getting like 10-year fixed at, what did you say it was?
Something like 2.68.
Yeah, so under 3 for 10 years fixed, when there were decades when the Bank of England rate, not the bank on top, the Bank of England was over 10%. So what happens when interest rates go like this to house prices?
Asset prices go
They
up.
tend to go like that, because everybody can afford about 1/3 of your salary per month. Now, you can either give it to the bank in interest or it's the seller in principal. So when you drop the interest side of the equation, you can raise the other side. So when Ireland cut their interest rate in half from 6 to 3 to join the ERM / to then join the euro, asset prices went up. Because the person with the job was, well, I get $1,000 a month. What can I get? Well, you need a lot less interest so you can buy a lot more currency. So I don't know, we're at a 300-year low for interest rates. Forget David Cycles, 300 years. Okay? It's not likely that they're going to go much lower. That may be your big external risk, besides that and the global warming one. I do own property in SC1. Every property in the area, and I'm talking like from between Tower Bridge and London Bridge, from the river down to like Elephant Castle, you can't build residential on the ground floor. It's below the water line and the floods. Now, what happened in New York where my son lives, I have probably the oldest kids here too. So my son lives in New York, and when the hurricane came through, he had to move out of the building because where's all the power connections? They're in the basement. So all the electric's out. So there's no lifts. So there are people who were told you have 4 hours to get out, and it might be a month or 12 months before you can get back in. So what does a lease to a landlord mean if you can't gain access for 12 months? What happens to stuff in your refrigerator for 12 months? Everything was contaminated with oil, so it was a toxic waste site at the lower level. So you couldn't get any clothes, you had no computers, you were working from home, and suddenly your office is gone, and all your equipment is gone in your home office, because you're not allowed in. It's still there, unless the crooks came in. But so, deal at the time. Talk to Rod, talk to a few others, talk to Fiona in particular. Don't get so worried about the big macro stuff. Shit'll happen, has for a long time. Who in here remembers the oil shocks in the 70s? Oil prices went through the roofs because the people that owned the oil figured out that they could jack the price up. It was like a 4x increase, right?
Oh, I'm not sure.
Rationing, and in the States, I was old enough, on the odd days, these cars can get fuel. On the even days, those cars can go to the gas station to get fuel. Now the U.S. is a net exporter of oil. We've got too much. We're giving it away to everybody else. Hell with those people in the Middle East. We're the biggest producer of oil in the world right now. Saudi Arabia is wondering what's going on. So what else? Anything else? No. So I'd rather just open it up to questions, because I think actually a lot of the expertise is over here. We're just the foil for you to discover that you know what you're doing. And you all have gaps, you all have fears, you all have concerns, but if you talk to each other, you start to understand. It's like, well, actually, maybe I know more than I thought, or she knows something, or he knows something. So the magic's in the room.
let's not also forget that governments are very indebted as well post-credit crunch, so they can't afford to let it rise too high either. But what
Wait. So more than half this country has no debt on their houses. Tends to be an older group, but basically more than half of the residential homes owned by the person have zero debt. We could put interest rates to 50% and it won't affect their house. They have no debt to service on the house. Second of all, governments are locking in things with long-term bonds. Unlimited maturity bonds, 10-year bonds, 30-year bonds. They're not going to get a big sticker shock if rates move. It does matter, they're constantly churning, but don't assume that the world would just keep rates low, just because it would be ugly if it wasn't. We had ugly. What was it, Nigel Lawson? He raised the interest rates by 3 percentage points in an afternoon. It went, I think, 15 to 18% in the afternoon. That was to try to defend sterling. Found out he couldn't do it, ran out of money, Soros won, and a lot of you lost houses.
I would say that there's a fairly unique circumstance happening, and the thing that's changed now is that globalization has meant that if you look at the G20 countries, the interest rates do seem to move in sync. So what you would be saying is that we would be out of sync with every major economy.
Or they all
doesn't
move.
seem to, yeah. So what we'd have to have is all the G20 pretty much going in that direction, which is upwards. And at the moment, over the next 5-6 years, there doesn't seem to be anything that's there that would cause all those countries to change direction. Correct. The days of the one country, one major economy in isolation is that much out of sync, I think are long gone because of the way we also interconnect.
You could also hedge with overseas mortgages as well, in theory.
Use that on currency.
Yeah, be
The
careful.
currency is more volatile.
arbitrage would negate it. But I would agree with what Ranjan is saying there, and with John, in that personally I don't think rates are going to get up to the level that you've indicated in the next 5 years. However, on a 10-year window, there is potential for that. But on a 10-year window, you also have to look at the fact that there's been inflation of earnings, therefore affordability becomes more affordable. So I don't think in the short-term window it's going to happen. And then to put that into a bigger picture perspective, when you look at the banks and how they're regulated, and look at the Basel funding formula, where they have to keep X pounds of reserves based upon the loan to values. Therefore, one of the things which I feel the government and the banking sector should be looking at is not the Section 24 taxation of landlords, but actually stress testing the banks based on loan to values. And the more the banks lend, therefore the more the interest rate is, or the more capital the bank have to keep on their balance sheet. Therefore, that would self-regulate and dampen the market.
If I could just say one thing, I mean, I in all my years, I've never really bothered about interest rates. What I bother about, because I can't control them, what I bother about is what I can control. And so when I buy a property, my initial gearing might be a little bit high, but I've got a plan within 3 or 4 years to get that down to 60%. And that might be through capital appreciation, or it might be through chipping away into debt. But if I maintain that 60% and less across the entire portfolio, then I don't believe that there's anything on the horizon to kill you. High gearing is the killer. It means that you can't withstand any shocks. What Fiona's doing, and I'm looking at a few projects, that is where you're buying off developers who are going bust, basically. They've just done things with high gearing and only one exit strategy, which is sell onto the market. If they did their projects with lower gearing and with alternative exit strategies, like I'm working with people who, one people I'm working with, they have just built some new development in Reading, but because of the way they've funded it, they're able to, they're not selling basically, but they are able to refinance it and keep it, and it's a good rental investment, and you can just bat it out for another 4 or 5 years and sell it later. So low gearing gives you survivability, and then you don't have to worry about predicting
No, I
all this
totally
stuff.
agree with you on that.
Exactly.
I think it's
Carol?
Just further
to what you're saying, Ranjan. You're saying really that anybody around the 60 mark have a better chance of survival?
Yeah, I think so.
Yep.
Oh, good.
Chance. So
There's always a chance. Yeah.
notice it's chance of survival, and partly, I'll tell you a real quick joke. So I'm in the woods with Rod, and there's a bear. I don't have to outrun the bear, I have to outrun Rod. So you want to be the one who survives when the one next to you goes under. And your cash flow with Fiona's 10-year locked rate, I mean, her risk is a lot lower for 10 years. The neighbor landlord might go out of business. When prices fall, you'll notice that rents rise. So the landlord wins with falling prices because the rents go up. The landlord wins when rents go down because it tends to mean prices go up or the yields go down. Yeah. So it's about staying in the game, which means a little bit lower interest or mortgage, fixing the rates. You want to create this longer runway, have a portfolio, have some free and clear properties so that you're still in the game when everybody else goes bust. Because most of us are still going to be here even in that period. So someone's going to rent your place.
If Corbyn comes in, we all start though. I don't know.
So what's the actual problem that he's getting squeezed and can't afford to service the loan?
No, they're pulling in the loan.
So can he refinance it against
Well,
the asset?
that is a possibility,
Because what-
but he's got everything on one big.
So this
So I've got a raise.
That's a different issue.
This is less about.
That's a structure issue.
That could be more of an issue that the bank needs their money back.
That's right.
And it's a commercial loan, and they can and they are. I mean, one thing I always say, and you know, I get banks, they take me out for lunch and all of that, and I said, look, you're a great bank, but I can't give you any of my business because you have your risk management policy, I have mine, and that is I'm not going to give you more than 25% of my debt portfolio. And all you have to do is say RBS 2008, and they know exactly what you're talking about.
So they won't be able to pull the loan unless it's in the contract that he signed.
Yeah.
So you need to read your contracts.
And it is in commercial contracts.
Yes,
Well,
exactly.
buy-to-lets, it isn't.
Yes, exactly. Generally, by the way, it wouldn't be, generally commercial would be, but he should have read that, or his solicitor should have told him to read that, because once a year they can revalue the portfolio.
Yes.
And it's a bit arbitrary, but it's what he signed up for.
So the conclusion is to have several lenders. Is that what you're saying right now?
Yeah, you've got to split your lending. You can't be
Slave to one lender.
well, that's what I've done. I just don't want. I was really scared, particularly in 2008, 2009, with all the stories. Lots of friends who had RBS loans. RBS was in serious trouble, and they called the loans in because they could. I had some RBS loans, but fortunately they were very old loans from 2003. And my contracts just said 1% above base for 25 years on commercial loans. And they couldn't touch them, because in my contract, it didn't say they could revalue anything like that. But the people with 5-7-year money, particularly who had had more recent loans, they were all stuffed. They were given 90 days to refinance their entire portfolio at a time when the credit crunch happened and fewer lenders were in the game.
I've got a couple of very good friends who are based in Lubbock in Texas, which interestingly enough is the town where Buddy Holly grew up. Back in the credit crunch times, they're developers. They had quite a big sort of turnover of money. They did a lot of borrowing early on, and they paid it right down. So when the credit crunch happened, they were unencumbered. They were running on their own money. All their competitors had the loans called in, and by default, they became the biggest developers in West Texas, and now they employ more than 200 staff. They're doing very, very well. And in the same way that, for example, Richard Branson did when he was starting Virgin Airlines, and with 2 or 3 days to go, the engine failed on the plane, and the banks would not stump up the cash for the extra engine, and he had a whip round. There are times when, provided your cash flow is strong enough, you can be independent from the banks, and that's when you really start to fly.
Yes. It's also that if you're in that situation, because I've bought businesses at 2009 to 2014, you can dictate the price. really dictate the price because you're in control. You're the man with cash in your pocket, and everybody wants out.
It's the old saying of cash is king, and being the contrarian and having the strong nerves and putting in the offer and then making it work at the price that you paid.
Yeah. If you know your business, what you're doing, and either the property, the area, or whatever, you can't go wrong.
Possibly private tenants being able to buy, having first refusal to buy the properties at, say, a third discount to market.
Do you think it's realistic they get that through within a term?
Yes.
Okay.
So they might get that through, but whether it would survive a challenge in the courts later. But do you have a decade to wait to find out?
Yeah.
You could have the caps rent, you could have other things. Now, it doesn't mean that everything that Labour wants is wrong. It just means that the popular vote will elect Donald Trump. He's going to save America. Like, almost nothing he says is true. But, you know, what has he done?
Yeah.
Other than try to do some illegal things.
I think I was having the debate earlier, and the point is politicians will say whatever they can to get themselves into a 70 grand a year job. Once they're in the job, they'll go, well, it was my colleagues over there who stopped me from doing it. They blocked it. Therefore,
It's obvious to me some things like they're not going to just close all private schools because where would they find the $9 billion to build the replacements for 600,000?
They're not financially literate. You're assuming there's some financial literacy there.
So we know some nonsense as well, trying to extrapolate which ones are genuine threats and which are just nonsense.
I think when I talk to people, and what I find amazing is that I find very few people who are successful, not just in business, but also in professions, who aren't thinking about leaving the country, basically. You know, I know of people now who are out there scouting homes in Portugal, in my circle.
I do.
So, you know, there's going to be an exit, because if you think about it, you know, personally, I do business and entrepreneurial activity because I enjoy it. If these bastards are not going to make it fun anymore because they hate us, basically, then you will go where, if you're in an abusive relationship, what do? You get out. If you're in a country which is completely abusive to you, guess what? You know, there are loads of countries out there, and then 10 countries where you can just walk in and get a visa, passport, and favourable tax treatment. Here's the hidden secret, right? Any country is a tax haven if you weren't born there. London is a tax haven for people who weren't born here, because Britain attracts high net worth people from around the world. In the same way, you can swan into countries like Malta, Portugal, Canada has a system. There are loads of them that have very, very favourable tax rates. So you will go where, if you are being abused in this relationship that we have with our government, with the state here, then you will go where you are treated better. And there is a whole list of places where you can go. I was on a TV show a couple of months ago, and this question was asked, and there were 4 people on the panel, and everyone on the goddamn sofa said they're out of here. Hurry up with the runway in Heathrow.
I was having a rummage around in the attic the other day, and I came across my parents' passport. That was from the middle of the sort of Wilson time in the 1960s. Exchange controls, 50 quid, you had to stamp in the back of the passport. And I remember 98p in the pound, top tax rate. I remember the winter of discontent with big mountains of rubbish, 3 mountains.
So wait a minute, did people hear that?
98p on the pound.
The top tax rate took 98p out of your pound as the top tax rate.
Now, I think we flip this on its head based on what Oliver has said. Because Oliver was saying, what happens if Corbyn gets it? My belief is that if you looked at it from the other side and the Blues got in, the UK will become an offshore tax haven for Europe, because they will be looking at what they call Reaganomics, the policy of dropping tax rates to bring investment in, to bring jobs, wealth creation here, which will actually drive more tax than raising taxes.
And on that point, I'm afraid we'll have to leave it. Thank you to everybody for coming along tonight. Thank you in particular to the panel for coming up. See you again.